Mr. President. Merci de me donner l'opportunité.
Thank you for having given me an opportunity to speak before you and to report on the activities of the joint G5 Sahel force, the international support which it enjoys specifically from MINUSMA, the various challenges that it faces, as well as the measures that may be envisaged to address this. I have just returned from the Dakar Forum, where the question of the reinforcement of the G5 force and support for MINUSMA has been addressed at length. I will revisit this during the course of my briefing. Over the past 6 months, the security situation in the Sahel has continued to deteriorate. Attacks have been attributed to or claimed by terrorist groups. They have targeted the security forces and civilians, and the number of these attacks has risen, as have violent incidents pitting members of various communities against one another. On 6 November last in Bangou, in northeastern Burkina Faso, some 40 civilians and soldiers were killed during an attack that was attributed to terrorist groups. In the past 10 days, nearly 100 elements of the Burkina Faso security elements from Mali and Niger have lost their lives in a spate of attacks, primarily targeting the Liptako-Gourma triangle. On 18 November, 24 soldiers from the Malian armed forces perished during a counterterrorism operation near Tabankor in northern Mali, near the Nigerian border. On the whole, since the beginning of this year, the number of security incidents has risen threefold in the region as compared to previous years, specifically in Burkina Faso and in Niger. In Burkina Faso, 489 incidents have been reported this year as compared to 151 last year. In Niger, 218 incidents occurred as compared to 69 incidents during the same period 1 year ago. Moreover, violence caused by terrorist groups in the Sahel now has expanded to cover countries in on the coast and along the Sahel-Sahara Strip, which brings together the operational zones of the joint G5 Sahel force and the multinational force in the Lake Chad Basin. This has been reported and observed by a number of representatives of countries in the sub-region in recent days in Dakar. They cautioned about the risk of the collapse of the security dam and the security mechanism in the region. In this regard, the heads of state of Mauritania and Senegal have renewed calls for a robust mandate for the G5 Sahel force. Mr. President.
Sahel is of serious concern and urgent action is needed. It is therefore encouraging that the G5 Sahel Joint Force has increased its operational tempo. I welcome the commitments and determination of the G5 Sahel countries to overcome the many challenges they face in operationalizing the joint force. Since the issuance of the report of the Secretary-General before you, the joint force has conducted one more operation in collaboration with the French forces. This operation took place in the border area between Mali and Burkina Faso from 1st to 17 November. It involved 1,400 troops from Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger alongside the French forces and resulted in the neutralization of 24 suspected terrorists, the seizure of arms, ammunition, 100 telephones, and 64 vehicles. The terrorist attacks against the base of the G5 Sahel Joint Force in Boulekessi, Mopti region, central Mali, and on the Malian Armed Forces post in Mondoro on 30 September, which resulted in the killing of dozens of soldiers, was a painful reminder of the dangerous environment the joint force and other security forces are operating in the Sahel. I would like to pay tribute to the courage and dedication of the personnel operating under the joint force in the fight against terrorism and to remember those who have paid the ultimate price for their countries. The joint force remains a critical part of a series of regional and international security responses to address extremist armed groups in the Sahel, along with other cross-border challenges, including trafficking in person, illicit goods, weapons and drugs, migration, and displacement. However, the joint force alone cannot secure the Sahel. More needs to be done to prevent further deterioration of the situation. To this end, I would like to welcome recent international and regional initiatives to respond to the expanding threat posed by terrorist armed groups in the Sahel and they are encouraging. One such initiative is a new partnership for security and stability in the Sahel, announced in August by the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, and the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, on the margin of the summit of the Group of Seven in Biarritz, France. The initiative is aimed at reinforcing troops and police forces from the G5 Sahel countries at the national level, which will play an instrumental role in combating terrorism. Another important initiative was announced by the leaders of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, on 14 September in Ouagadougou to combat growing insecurity and terrorism. Their pledge of $1 billion to fight terrorism and extremism over the next 5 years is a sign of a renewed commitment to take ownership and find solutions to the challenges facing their countries. In parallel, it will remain critical to continue supporting the efforts by the joint force of the G5 Sahel, as well as top mobilized external partners to that end. Mr. President, Resolution 2480 of 2019, of 28 June 2019, lifted geographical restrictions on the provision of water, rations and fuel to all battalions of the joint force. MINUSMA has taken swift action to provide the required support. On 3rd October, the joint force requested for the provision of 429,000 liters of fuel and oil, as well as 35,000 rations for all its battalions in all 5 countries. In response, after completing a risk assessment under the United Nations Human Rights Due Diligence Policy, MINUSMA has begun delivery of the requested items. So far, the mission has delivered 60,000 liters of fuel and 4,500 rations to designated collection points in Mali. MINUSMA stands ready to deliver the rest of the support as soon as the contingents confirm their readiness to receive these items up. The delivery of live consumable support to all contingents operating under the joint force has the potential to help the joint force to enhance performance better and operate more effectively. However, more equipment, capabilities such as air assets and training will be needed for the force to make a difference on the ground. I wish to recall in that regard that the provision of support by MINUSMA to the G5 Joint Force, as mandated by Security Council Resolution 2391 of 2017 and 2480 from 2019, was and should remain one of several mechanisms of assistance for enhancing the capacities of the G5 Joint Force. I would also like to welcome the efforts by the Joint Force to implement the human rights and international law compliance framework with the support of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and other partners. It is of critical importance that the Joint Force and the member states of the G5 Sahel continue to take all necessary measures to ensure that the protection and security of the civilian population remains at the center of their security efforts, both within the joint force and at national level. We also call on the Joint Force and G5 Sahel countries to ensure the full investigation of allegations of human rights violations involving contingents of the force, which not only harm population trust, but also the image and the reputation of the joint force and that of national security forces. And ultimately, the very purpose of these military operations. I'm pleased to note the efforts undertaken in operationalizing the police component of the joint force in operations related to fighting terrorism and transnational organized crime. The police component has an integral role in the implementation of the joint force compliance framework and in investigating allegations of human rights violations by members of the joint force.
Mr. President, presently, terrorism is a shared problem, a problem for all. No country can tackle this issue single-handedly. I wish to recall the fact that most of the G5 countries have already dedicated nearly 20% of their national budgets to defense and security. This reflects a reduction in investments in human security, which are nonetheless critical to root out the main causes of insecurity. Hence, it is incumbent upon the international community to contribute to the counter-extremism effort carried out in the Sahel. It should call upon the joint force to fully play its role and to secure tangible results on the ground. It is important for financing pledges to be honored. Here I wish to applaud the contribution made by the European Union and other international partners. Their support for the joint force is both decisive and vital. Yet I would reiterate my call for the Secretary-General to ensure that there be predictable and sustained financing for the joint force. Security-related initiatives will only bear fruit if satisfactory responses are delivered to issues pertaining to underdevelopment, poverty, governance, difficulty to access basic services, systematic marginalization and exclusion, as well as the repercussions of climate change. It is necessary that people, specifically those who are young, be provided with prospects for the future. These prospects should go beyond daily needs to ensure that there be development, to ensure that there be a gender equality advanced, and that access be facilitated for economic opportunities and social services. Hence, I would call upon partners to ensure disbursement of the pledges and support for implementation of the United Nations Integrated Strategy in the Sahel. Investments in sustained and inclusive development efforts is the most effective way to tackle root causes of conflict, violent extremism, and terrorism. To conclude, I would call upon governments in the region, beyond the security-related response, to continue to set up mechanisms and to implement reforms so as to bolster unity and national cohesion. This is to be the thrust of the partnership that should be shored up to counter terrorism, insecurity, and inequality. Together, it is incumbent upon us to mobilize ourselves to a greater degree as a matter of urgency for the Sahel. Thank you.